Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome to the very first episode of It Came From the Comics with Ben Bateman and Jandreau here on Nerds and Suits. We will be talking to you about all of our predictions about WandaVision and, of course, diving straight into the Vision run by Tom King. We can't wait to bring you the very first show. We'll see you guys in just one quick second. What's going on, guys? Welcome to the very first episode of It Came From the Comics with Ben Bateman, and welcome to Nerds and Suits, Mr. Jandreau.
I like the bizarro. We did the opposite color scheme here, and I think that really suits the Nerds and Suits today.
Dude, you're wearing a jacket? It makes
the first time in a year. It's snug. The game has changed. Quarantine doesn't allow for a lot of quality eating.
How the biceps feeling? Feeling good?
I feel snug. I feel like I was talking before air. I feel much more Bane than Warrior, but it's going. We're in suits, I suppose.
You wonder how like fashion trends work. You know how like when you'll look back at a time, you're like, well, the reason this trend happened is because people were doing this because they had to. And I'm like, are sweatpants and suit jackets going to become the thing? Because maybe sweatpants and suit jackets are just going to become. I'll just start wearing sweatpants and suit jackets everywhere, right?
Dude, the amount of leisure wear that has increased in my wardrobe over the last 12 months, and the amount I just bought my first tracksuit, and I don't think I'm going back. Like tracksuits are gonna become a staple in my wardrobe.
Your tracksuit, by the way, it looks heavily inspired by the film The Gentleman. Is that correct?
I literally thought when watching The Gentleman last January, I need one of those, but that's a foolish decision. I'm very frugal. I waited a calendar year, having thought about it almost every week, and then was like, well, I'm going to buy Colin Farrell, but in blue. And now I don't know if I'll wear anything else.
And by virtue, you actually were just basically thinking about Bobby Gucci the whole time, because it's essentially what the character in the film is Finstock, right? That's who it is.
Do you know Conor McGregor, the UFC fighter?
Yeah.
His coach in real life is like the Zen version of Colin Farrell's character. So it's really funny that when I met him, Coach Kavanaugh, I was like, you're like a calm Gucci. And like, there was no explaining that to him. Like, he's like if Splinter and Gucci had a baby. He's like this samurai warrior that is like helping kids and all this stuff. But you can see the eccentric waiting to come out like Finstock.
Well, as much as Finstock finds a way to work his way into all places and all shows, that is not what we're here to talk about today. We specifically are here to talk about our brand new show. It came from the comics, which I'm so excited to have you on the network to talk about. Long since I have been a fan of comic books and of movies, I have known about Coy Jandreau and about your prowess in the comic book world. It's funny, as kids, do you think we would have been friends? Because I was like a big nerd. Or do you think we would have been like competitive as the comic book nerd in our school?
I feel like we would have been friends that like were defending comic bookdom while being broy. Because I imagine you were like me, where it's like the Spider-Man shirt was under the Abercrombie shirt. So like you buttoned it up and you're like, sometimes I'm like Superman and other times I hide it. So no, like I was
a good assumption, but I was blue hair, bowl cut. I was Sharpie on my arms. I was a weird kid.
I was totally that preppy dude. I had the frosted tips. I had the nice car. Wow. I was like an in-syncy boy. Like I was problematic. And I definitely like, I was the kid that was like sneaking in booze at 14 and like trying to be cool. Yeah. I was definitely a popular prick.
You were like cool Peter Parker. You were like the Brian Bendis Peter Parker, not like the lame one.
I always said that I got trapped in Flash Thompson with the brain of Peter Parker, and I've always wanted to like be Peter Parker, but I've always been like, ugh. I was never a bully, but I definitely like identified with jocks more than nerds, and now I can be a nerd. It's so nice to be embracing the raised by comics side of the game.
Well, there's so many people that are embracing the comic book side of these things with the nerd world that we live in now. Obviously, Marvel has taken over the world. Disney, by virtue, has taken over the world because of Marvel. And of course, we have tomorrow dropping on Disney Plus the first 2 episodes of WandaVision, which is the first Disney Plus streaming MCU series. And as you have described it, you've told me and others, you believe this is an Iron Man level event happening right now on Disney Plus, which is pretty exciting considering that movie, an Iron Man level event, kicked off the most exciting 12 years in comic book movies ever. So talk to me, why is WandaVision an Iron Man level event? What do people need to know about that?
I think this is going to restructure everything as much as Iron Man structured everything. I think all of the beautiful nails and screws that went into the architecture of what the MCU is are about to be magnetoed right out of that bitch. Like, it's about to be an entirely new game after WandaVision, because we're going to be dealing with the multiverse. We're going to be dealing with alternate realities. We're going to be tying everything that comes after WandaVision is going to be a different universe. So Iron Man, I think, is up there with Avengers as before and after. Iron Man, in our case, affects our real world as well as the fictional world of the MCU, because Iron Man, if you go back, you're like, oh, that's when everything changed in cinema. I think, much like that, WandaVision is going to be the format of television changing, as well as the in-universe ramifications changing. That's why I consider Iron Man a bigger event than even the Avengers, because everything led from Iron Man to the Avengers. I think everything's going to lead from WandaVision to everything to come. And that's going to affect both our world, we live in LA, and the MCU world that we share in fiction. I think it's literally the biggest thing we've had since 2008.
It's amazing when you say things changed. I recently tried, and this was an attempt, to watch Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance, which came out in 2007. The idea that movie came out in 2007, but the MCU started within a year of that, is like, one of them feels, not even kidding you, like a porno parody of what an MCU movie would be. Like, it's so offensive to watch the beginning of Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance. I mean, just the whole thing. Those movies are so bad. But anyway, so this whole thing starts in 2008. It builds and it builds and it builds. And now we're in this weird pivot moment. We're about to go into the premium streaming Marvel world. Yeah. We got it with Mandalorian. It was really special. People loved it. But we're going now straight into the streaming MCU. And it's going to be this, followed by Falcon and the Winter Soldier, followed by presumably a number of series that are going to be canonical. They're going to become canon with these movies over the next 5 to 10 years as they build towards the next Infinity War. So This is the beginning. You believe this is the beginning of the build towards that next Infinity War?
I think the sequel to this is Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, which is going to further shatter our reality. I think the follow-up to that is going to be multiple Spider-Man, which is going to shatter our reality. I think we're building to Young Avengers, which you and I have talked about quite a bit. I think that the multiverse lends itself to some beautiful Chung art. I think it lends itself to some crazy different levels of Avengers ages. We've already got half the team that's assembled. We've already cast most of them. We've got Miss Marvel. We've got Cassie Lang. We've got Kate Bishop. We've got everyone we need except for some of the crazier ones who happen to be the children of the character that's debuting on a new show tonight. We're about to get the characters that we don't have yet. So I think there's going to be, once we get into the actual comic book discussion, I think there's going to be a lot of what reality is conversations. We've had that a bit, and I think it was really smart of Marvel, because Marvel plays the 10-year plan by having the Spider-Man movie close Phase 3. To me, Spider-Man Far From Home is a denouement to the Endgame experience. It's not even its own thing as much as it is a memoriam for Tony Stark. It's kind of like setting up what's to come, but it doesn't really have a conclusion that feels like, oh, we're done here. It feels like we're about to go somewhere else. And I feel like Mysterio is a great character to be like, hey, you don't really know what your reality is. Nothing you see can be believed. Oh, by the way, the multiverse is coming. So I think we're already dipping our toes in some craziness. And then Spider-Verse doing as well as it did animated 4 years ago now, which is crazy to think about, 3 years ago now. I think that's going to lend itself to what live action can do. And I think it all literally starts in 8 hours from right now. I think it's about to change everything.
Well, I'm so excited to watch it. A couple things here in the chat. First of all, you guys are right. I referenced Spirit of Vengeance in 07. It's the first Ghost Rider, the one that came out in 07. And that's also the one that I started watching. I've actually never even tried to watch Spirit of Vengeance. But
it's a little better. Idris Elba's in it. That's something.
Okay. Yeah, that's sweet. That's sweet. But there's a bunch of cool people in the chat here hanging out. I'm excited to see you guys all in here. A few things that we have going on. The reason this show today is happening and the reason we decided to launch this show is that Coy and I, for a while, have been talking about this idea that comic books, the lifeblood of our creative juices that came when we were little children, they're still so popular, but in a different form. And not that many people get to talk about the source material and that source material and how it affects these things. So we believe that the show WandaVision, that's debuting, as you said, in about 8 hours, is heavily, heavily influenced by a couple of comic books. One in particular is this comic book here, The Vision. It's a run on The Vision by Tom King. Let's see if I can get it on camera here. There we go. And, I asked Coy, what do you think a good one for us to start with would be? And he suggested this comic book. So I went and I picked it up and I read it, and it is just fantastic. It is so good. You read it for a fourth time this time?
Yeah, I can't, it's one of those books that every time I think about it, it's like, well, why don't I just do that again?
It's really unique. The tone was beautiful. It's just very, very cool. And so there's a few questions that we want to answer as far as this goes. But for those wondering kind of what this show is and why it exists, we would like to make this show something that we do ahead of the release of a lot of the big series, the big movies, the big series. And we go and touch on a piece of that content that is the inspiration behind it. And we hope you guys support us in doing it. So the first thing I'll ask everybody here to do is hit that thumbs up button on this video. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. And we actually have a very special giveaway we're going to be doing for you guys this show. Coy and I will both be signing this particular copy of The Vision, this full, it's the full 12-issue run, and we'll be sending it to one lucky viewer of this episode. So if you're watching, the way to get entered is you either are a patron of Nerds and Suits, which is patreon.com/nerdsandsuits, the $15 or higher level, or any donation on the show, either Streamlabs or Super Chat at the $10 level or above, will get you one entry. If you're both, $15 patron, $10 donation, 2 entries. At the end of it, we'll select one person at random, and that's the person we will send this comic book to. So as you get your questions in throughout the episode, keep that in mind. We will try to get this to one of you guys. It looks like we already have our first super chat here from our guy, JD Domash. Big salute to you, brother. Says, Coy, a pre-panned proper kid? That's insane. He must mean a preppy proper kid. That's insane.
I was a different dude. I was also that kid that liked to be at every lunch table. So I definitely was like a goth some days, a rocker kid some days, a preppy kid some days, but I always dressed preppier than I should have. And I look back, I think the way I chose to go through high school, I'm going to regret more the more years pass. And I feel like being the kid that drew Sharpies on your arm like Ben was, I would not regret that nearly as much as like, I'm going to buy a sleeveless Abercrombie shirt and wear my hair up. Like, I just can't believe that was me.
Did you have puka shells?
Dude, I had so many, and so many were handmade from my hippie friends. So I didn't just have puka shells. I had handmade puka shell necklaces. I had hemp bracelets. I had like the loafer shoes as well as the sandals. I wore shorts all into the winter, like a true Bostonian. But I also wore like Red Sox tees and drank like Coors Light. I was like pressing shuffle on an iPod, the person. That's who I went through high school as.
I'm going to be honest with you, Coy. You sound like you were pretty obnoxious. I don't know if we would have been
the worst. But we would have talked comics, and I would have not been like, yo, this guy likes comics. I'd have been like, yo, this guy likes comics. He sits with us. And then whether or not people accepted, then they deal with the ramifications, because I was that asshole. One of my nicknames was Weight Room. Like, I was a prick. I went by Weight Room on purpose.
That was your name, was Weight Room. Well, in high school, my nickname was Rockstar. So one of us was probably more obnoxious than the other one, you know? Truly.
Either way.
I don't know who wins that battle, because that's also pretty bad. But
what year did you graduate?
I was class of 06, but I graduated a year early, so I graduated in 05.
Oh, I was class of 06, but I started a year early, so I should have graduated in 07. Because I think we're about the same age, but I'm a little younger. So yeah, same. We graduated at the same time for the same reason, but both problematic.
We also had all of probably the same moments where you were like, guys, did you know that Blade is actually a comic book? I know you like the movie, but Blade's a comic book. So you like comic books. Gotcha!
Did you have it on VHS where you taped it off TV because it was rated R?
My parents let me get the actual VHS. I owned the copy, the movie, Blade. I remember, I remember the first time I saw it, I was like, this is my favorite movie I've ever seen in my life. This is the coolest thing I've ever watched. I was convinced.
It was on a VHS with My Favorite Martian and The Matrix because it's 6-hour VHS, and we played it. One of my friends had a TV in his car in the back seat with a VCR on it, like a TV VCR combo. Every time we road tripped, boom, Blade's on, and that was my 15 or 16-year-old experience.
Incredible. All right, guys. So we are going to kind of read your Streamlabs and Super Chats throughout the show, as well as if you're not a patron, you want to sign up during the show, I'll shout you out for becoming a patron as well. But our first two, we have a $10 Streamlab here from JD Domash. I definitely think whatever happens in WandaVision will break the multiverse and will have the repercussions across this phase and several others, even though I don't think Wanda is responsible for what is happening in the show necessarily. Strong guess. We will address that. Trust me, plenty in this episode. Our next one here is from AJ Lancaster. Gotta catch it on replay, but congrats on the inaugural episode. Hopefully many more to come. Wow, they're rolling in right now. Another one from call sign Monty. As a lifelong comic reader, I'm so happy to see you guys celebrating comics and exploring the source material. Support local comic shops. Big
yes,
Monty. Monty's a big comic book guy. I think he's gonna love this show. And then our next one here from Joseph Boros here. I was a jock, did plays, and played Magic at lunch. I was a strange child. Hey man, you would have fit in. You would have fit in real well.
Respect.
Yeah. So we'll continue to read those as we go, but let's jump into the next part of the show here, because the next question that we kind of want to ask is specifically why this comic book? You know, Coy, like obviously the other comic book that people are talking about is a big crossover event from 2005 called House of M. And when people looked at this show getting announced, House of M, I think was the sort of general idea of that's probably what this is. But House of M is not very good. It's not horrible. It's just not that good. It's not a super memorable comic book. Whereas the Vision won an Eisner, right? Like it's
the bar. Like the Eisner is the Oscar. For those who don't know comic books, it's the Oscar for Best Picture for comics. This is a pedigree that few books get, and it is deserved, I think.
And it's a really amazing book, and the tone is incredible. So, you know, your suggestion for this book when you talked about it was like, this is one of the best things that you're going to read, one of the best comics you're going to read. Talk to me a little bit about how you felt when you first read it the first time.
So this was my introduction to Tom King, who's become one of my favorite modern writers ever. So out of nowhere, I just picked up this book and I was like, oh, Vision, he's sometimes interesting. And I think what makes this book special is you're getting the time to invest in a character that isn't always, or even arguably usually, written well. He's a very special character, and it takes a lot to get him right because he's so dense. You're dealing with very broad concepts, and usually comic books don't take the time to invest in Vision to make him as good as he can be. It's a one line of dialogue like, oh no, AI, and then they like cut to a monster. Or it's like, we're fighting Ultron, we've got Vision here now, this is convenient. It never had the real weight of what artificial intelligence or what the meaning of humanity was or what it is to be sentient as a synthezoid. And I picked up this book and I was like, I've always wanted a Philip K. Dick-esque comic book about AI. And I did not think Vision was the route because I thought it would have to be an indie. I thought it would be some Image book or Dark Horse book I picked up. I didn't think Marvel would be like, yes, please do a 12-issue maxi series dissertation about Vision by way of Americana in the 50s, but in the modern day with some horrific, dreadful tones. It's such a hodgepodge of things that shouldn't work, but do. And then I was like, oh wait, Tom King's my guy. And he has been since. The book was my introduction to him. He's one of my favorite writers, like I said, to this day, because he's able to create a narrative that makes you feel like you love this character if you've never met them, and makes you feel like you really love this character if you've always known them, because he's saying the things you've wanted to see. You're like, oh, this is my guy. Thank you for being smarter than me and making a whole book about it. So the whole book was just me having a masterclass in writing. It's got Shakespearean references that are broad and beautiful. It's got lots and lots of Philip K. Dick flavor. Philip K. Dick flavor is probably another thing. But it's got lots of overtones that I think the show is going to really pull from that are super important to comic books. Because if you've never read a comic book and you want to read one from the big two, this is one of the top 5 I'd recommend to be like, hey, they're not for kids. Check out this harrowing shit.
Yeah, this comic was really unique, a really special comic book. You mentioned that it has that Philip K. Dick vibe to it. And the thing I really took away from it, the thing that stuck out to me the most was, and I'm not even kidding, I was reading this last night as I was finishing it, And I had this moment where my brain was wandering because it's so poetic as you're reading some of the pages. You can get a little lost. And I was like, there's something important here. And I read it a third time. And then I was like, work faster, computer brain. Stop losing. Stop. Like, I was just like, be more focused. And I think it's because by that point I was 6 issues in or whatever. And it's like the way that he speaks as a character, the way that all of the Vision family speaks in this book, you really kind of dive into that world of like these living computer creatures. For those that don't know what the book is, as a little synopsis, we're going to read a little later in the show what the actual pitch was, but this is Vision and a character that he refers to as wife most of it, though her name is Virginia. It's wife Vision, and there are 2 children, and they're living with like a white picket fence, and he's a stay-at-home mom, and he's works for the government, and his kids go to school, and they interact with other kids, and they have science projects they do, but they also phase through walls, and they also are super strong, and Vision's job is also to help the Avengers when he's needed. And it's this weird adjustment of like, why do kids or people do this stuff to feel this way? What's a solvable problem? What's like an emotional problem versus just like a general solvable problem? 1 + 1 = something. And they ask all these questions, and it's very poetic, and it's a really interesting experience because by the end of 12 issues, you kind of do feel like you're in the mind of a robot. Your mind feels like a robot's mind.
And you're so into the language that when there's a human, it's almost jarring. Like when someone talks not in the way that's so controlled and important that you notice that stuff. And one of the things I really liked was the whole experience felt like it almost was like a movie in its show in itself. You're so in the world. I kept forgetting it's a comic book. I kept being like in the zone, especially if you read it all at once. You read all 12. It's such a mesmerizing quality the language has that you're so invested in Vision. You understand that he's an android, but you're like, yeah, bro, androids. Like you don't remember that in our world there aren't androids. You're like, yeah, this guy I care about, is an android, not like this is make-believe. And it's so impressive that a comic can bring you into a world to such a level that you believe in actual fiction as empathy.
Yeah, there's also some really interesting elements to this comic too that I think, so comic books get to lean, Marvel and DC especially, they really get to lean into this idea over time that the day-to-day job of a superhero, of a super being, is this kind of like, I just go to work and I fight the mole man or whoever is the villain of the day. And they almost joke about it at this point because they've been writing the same stories with the same characters fighting the same type of villain on a monthly basis since like the 1940s. So they can kind of make those references if we just go to work, that like the movie versions of these characters, they can't really live in that world because those movies have to be so self-serious. And so there is a section in this comic book where like they're kind of like, oh, Nova was supposed to have the night off to have dinner with his mom, but maybe he can fill in for you tonight, Vision, as we fight the Giganto or whoever the hell it was. And like, it's interesting that they can get away with that in comic books. And that's another part of this. Like, I just go to work. I'm the Vision. I go help the Avengers. And that's my job that the movies can't do.
And that's what I think the shows are going to do. I honestly think WandaVision is going to start to deal with it's so many hours. It's so much more screen time. I think Falcon and Winter Soldier are going to deal with it being a government job. I think we're going to see a lot more commentary on them clocking in and clocking out as being Falcon and Winter Soldier. I think WandaVision is going to be dealing with Scarlet Witch being an employee of someone. I think we're going to see a lot of really interesting things. And I also like the way I think the multiverse explodes is I don't think Vision is still with us. And that's an important part of later on in the Vision series. We shouldn't go full spoilers with the book so people read it, but there is a lot of commentary on what reality is. And reality is subjective. And I think WandaVision is going to cause a lot of that subjectivity. And people are like, oh, wait, Vision died. I think he did. I think that the show we're about to watch is going to be someone going through the trauma of realizing that someone died and not accepting reality. And that's a lot like what the book is. It's not accepting reality. There's so much in this book that makes you question everything you believe. And it's so well done that you actually start to do so, even though you live in our reality.
Yeah, I think for one more time, for anybody who's joined the show since we started talking about it, the comic book in question is The Vision. It's this 12-issue run here, this Tom King comic book. You can get it on Amazon, your local comic book store. It's excellent. It's really, really good. It's available for $29.99. And I do think that you're going to see a lot of the stuff from this comic book in the show, as well as House of M, which I spoke, not so flatteringly of a moment ago, but some of the people in the chat were saying they really enjoyed, which is totally fair. I don't think House of M was horrible by any means. Didn't stand with me in the same way that some comics have, but I know
it's a very important reread, but it also is a part of its time, whereas Vision feels timeless. When you read House of M, it's a very apparent when it's from, whereas I think Vision is something anyone can read, comic or no.
Absolutely. So continuing to kind of move through some of the things that we want to talk about on the show, the next thing I want to ask you about is when you're reading this comic book, you got to figure the most important moments, the ones that really stick with you. And these are going to be spoiler moments, guys, because there's no way to talk about them otherwise. We're calling this the you can't put it down moment. This is that moment when you're reading the comic book and you're kind of like, I could go to bed right now, but I think I just need to finish this story. It's too good. I'm too wrapped up. And it's exactly what happened to me last night. You know, I was like, I can finish in the morning before the show, or I can finish tonight. And I ended up staying up late and reading the full last 6 after my moment happened. And I'm going to jump in first by saying, you know, a lot of this comic book is the Vision family, but there's this seed that is kind of planted. And that seed that's planted is that Vision is in love with Scarlet Witch. And that's his true love. And there are these little things that you find out kind of like later a little bit more why, but that throughout the show, it's like images that are reminiscent of her, or he's clearly having memories of her. And there's one particular chapter that harkens back to a relationship that Vision and the Scarlet Witch had. And there's just something about the way that her as a character and the way that the two of them and their relationship is presented. Even something about the way she's dressed in one of the scenes when they're at home. She's wearing like mom jeans and they're just interacting like a couple, like a real couple living at home in a suburban household. I just was like, and they're interacting like people. And I think this is probably some of the stuff that they got with, you know, Elizabeth Olsen and Paul Bettany in the scene just before they get, you know, taken in the subway. The way they're talking to each other, all that stuff, they're living together like a real just regular people couple, not a superhero couple. And then Wanda has to have this moment in the scene when Vision is like, Wanda, I need to talk to you. The kids aren't real. Like they have a family, but the kids aren't real. And she freaks out and she loses it on him and she's screaming at him because she's obviously manifested the idea of these kids. And there's something about the duality of the way that they see their lives and Vision as is he real? Is he a person? Is he a machine? How does that all work? This one particular issue really for me is what I think so much of that issue is going to end up in this show. I can't see in any way that it wouldn't. That whole issue feels like page for page, you're going to see shots of that end up in this show. Not for me was the issue where I was like, I got to finish this. This is too good.
Mine, that is one of my favorite issues in modern comic books. And I think we've even seen that wardrobe in the show's trailers. There's the green shirt in the last issue of Vision is the first trailer they put out. So when he was wearing like khakis and a plaid green shirt, I was like, oh, I was the Leo meme, but like very excited at D23. But for me, the moment happened a little earlier. The first time I read it, it was a child is shot in this book, and you've met the child, and you're so endeared to the child because he's the only one that's really actually nice to Viv. The kids are Viv and Vin, which hilarious. Vin number chef's kiss. What a great yes, please. Viv and Vin are the kids, and Viv is bullied just like Vin is. They're androids in a human school. They fly there. They float through walls. They're picked on because kids. But this one kid's nice to her in a very human, very real way. He seems to have a crush on her. She definitely has a crush on him. She talks about how she replays the memory of them walking in the rain through her memory banks. It's so sweet and so android and so lovely. And then the mom, through a very understandable series of circumstances, confronts the dad. The dad is protecting his kid. The love between the dad and son is something else I appreciate because there's so many ways to make the villains of any android story like humans are bad. They don't do that here. Everyone's protecting their kind. Everyone's protecting their kids. Everyone's protecting their tribe. And then something horrible happens because of how androids would react, because of how humans would react. And the whole situation is just so impossibly believable that it makes it way more heartbreaking. And I'm like, whoa. I'm at the top of the roller coaster. I cannot stop until we're through the third hoop. Like I'm just riding this. And I couldn't put it down from that point.
They're two of the most memorable scenes in the whole comic book. I love in that scene you're talking about as well, how he raises the gun towards Virginia, like, I'll protect my son. And you're like, what do you mean protect your son? Like, that's a Vision. You can't, you have a gun. Like,
but what else would a human do?
Right. And you know, it's a gun and that's a Vision. You know, it's not going to do anything, but the way that whole scene plays out, it's really, really terrific. I also love that stuff with Chris Kinski and Viv. That stuff is really, really great. It's one of the most memorable comic books I can think of. It really did make me think in a way that Very few comics really ever have. So that's our can't put it down moment, guys. If you have a different one, if you have read this comic book and there's one that really sticks with you, put it in the chat, put it in the Streamlabs, the super chat. We're going to get on to some of the other influences of this comic book. In the meantime, I do want to remind everybody here, that copy of the Vision collected paperback that I just held up a second ago, we're giving that away. It's part of the show. We're hoping that if we do this every month, we're going to have this ability to buy one of these and sign it and send it off to you guys. Your support, obviously, between the Streamlabs, the Super Chats, and Patreon are going to be the things that allow us to do it. So, get in your entries. Anybody who donates at the Streamlabs or Super Chats at the $10 level or is a $15 or above patron will be entered in, randomly drawn. We'll sign the comic and send it to you. And if you do both, you get 2 entries. So let's talk a little about some of the other the inspirations for this story. Obviously, we mentioned House of M. Let's talk a little bit about what that story is. It's a crossover series from 2005. The premise of the story, I think, is actually the Scarlet Witch loses her children, and that's what drives her off the defense.
So where I think this show goes is, I think House of M is going to be a huge influence, but not as much. There's too many characters, one, that are from the comic books. It's too big to be a show or movie or anything. It's just, there's a lot of crossovers. There's a lot going on. But I do think the key moments from House of M are going to be happening in the show. I do think we're going to have the loss of the children. I do think I had a pitch from 2014 over at Screen Junkies where I said the mutants were going to come to the Marvel Universe via M of House. I thought that Wanda might say mutants instead of saying no more mutants. So the end of WandaVision could be Wanda manifesting mutant kind by saying the word mutants and using her insane magic to cause the X gene to activate. That was my original pitch for how we get mutants. Because in the comic book, the very end is her saying no more mutants, and entire species goes down to 156. The rarest of all species on the planet. They're the leftovers, so to speak. So that is what House of M is known for, is this schism, the before House of M and after House of M. And there's some great crossover stuff. There's some really fun, Magneto's issues are all solid. The writing's great. The art's great. But there's so much filler. It's kind of like the Clone Saga. I love the Clone Saga. But there's a lot of times where you're like, that wasn't necessary. And I spent $4 on it. And this is adding up. So that's problematic with comic book crossovers.
The 8 issues of House of M, like the actual main series, I know I read all of. The issue with House of M was that they went like a little too hard, and they branded too many comics as crossover comics. And there was so many of them, and the branding on the crossovers were kind of cheap looking, and I think even the paper quality was kind of cheap.
The paper was like, it was a thinner ply, and sometimes it was laminated, sometimes it wasn't. So I was like, this is your event, and it just felt like you were belittling me, the consumer.
Yeah, exactly. And so it just didn't leave the best taste. But it is obviously going to be a comic book that gets read a lot, the same way that leading into any major one of these stories. I mean, going into Bane showing up in Rises, you had everybody buying Nightfall. Those aren't particularly good comic books. They're just famous comic books.
No Man's Land is like 30 issues, and you had to read that before you watch Dark Knight Rises as well. And like some of it ties in, but No Man's Land is enormous. It's like an omnibus by itself.
Yeah, No Man's Land took like a year or something like that.
Yeah, across multiple Bat books.
Yeah. So some of the other inspirations, though, obviously, you do have this Tom King book that we're talking about. You have House of M. And then I think you're going to have some of the other kind of Ultron stories. There's one particularly great sequence in this Tom King book where he says, I am Vision of the Avengers, and I have saved the world 37 times. And he says, now I can't quantify exactly how many, but 37 feels like the ones that I can. And he goes through, and it's interesting because he's talking to a cop, I think, at the time. Yeah. And it's cool because it's almost like the computer brain is running while he's having a conversation, but it's running at the same time.
And it's a different color speech bubble, which is a really great, subtle way to tell us we're in his head. I love that.
And it goes through the history of every single time Vision has been part of a huge worldwide, universe-wide event. And each time. And of the 37, like 13 of them are Ultron or something like that. It's like a ridiculous number. He keeps just being like Ultron again, and then Ultron again, and then Ultron again. And
you can hear Bettany now. Now that it's Bettany, in that sequence especially, I kept being like, again. And I kept hearing that like beautiful Jarvis, the somber tone that we're going to get tonight.
Yeah, agreed. So he kind of lists through them, and there's so many instances of Ultron. It does really bring to mind the concept of Ultron as a character. He first debuts in Avengers 55 back in 1968, officially unnamed in 54, the previous issue, but in 55 is the first Ultron that you get. And ever since 1968, for the last 52 years, we've had iterations of this Ultron theme. So much so that obviously, Spader, who's the most redeeming part of Age of Ultron, does a great job with it, was supposed to be sort of a big bad in the middle of the whole thing. And it makes you think, probably at some point Ultron comes back in the MCU in some context. You'd have to think it's such an age-old concept. The AI, the evil AI that's programmed to destroy everything, and you fight against your programming. Do you think we're going to see more Ultron at some point?
There's other stories not in the MCU movies that use Ultron. There's a VR experience that has Ultron that's truly incredible, and there's something, and that's MCU branded. So I do think he comes back at some point. It's also a note on Tony Stark's hubris, which is obviously his big arc. So it's going to be interesting to see where they go with the Banner, Thor, Stark, love child, hubris. But it was 55, we got Ultron. 57, we got Vision. So it's funny to think about how quickly that arc was, because that's 3 months of comic books. Vision's in issue 57. He's the cover where it says, "Behold the Vision," and it's this amazing. It's one of my favorite covers ever. But it's fascinating to think about those characters being so intertwined. It almost feels like we have to, because unless the whole show is about him thinking of his father figure, unless they bring in that Runaways character that's also in the Vision comic we're talking about right now, his brother. Victorious. Yeah, he becomes victorious, but he's Victor while he's just a civilian, and it's this amazing character that's like the even more civilian Vision. And so there's all these commentaries on like what sentience is and all these things that I think that's the basis of the show. What it is to be human is just like the comics, what it is to be human. And Ultron is like, it's not worth it to be human. You're a virus. You're a problem. Like he's the yin to the yang. So I think Ultron, the concept, will be heavy in WandaVision. And I think the comic books we're both referencing will be heavily mentioned. But again, it's not an Avengers show. So therefore, it's going to be like what the themes of those comic books reflected are going to be reflected on the TV show.
What's the most famous iteration of Vision leading up to this Tom King Vision comic that we're talking about? I mean, I was trying to think in my experience as a character, what was the last time I could remember Vision really getting the royal treatment? And honestly, he was always very powerful, right? Like he's considered to be like super powerful. I mean, as a couple, they're just like so powerful. It's crazy. But I couldn't really think of another one. I feel like this was a very unique take on a character that doesn't get very much love very often.
The problem is his power. He's a Deus Ex Machina when you write him wrong. He's fun in team books like Bendis's Avengers. He's fun in the new Avengers. He's fun in the Avengers books around this time that King was writing him. That suit particularly jumps out in my mind. But the problem is when you have a character like Vision, how do you write other people as relevant? Like, he in this book takes on a lot of Avengers because he can. So, like, why is Spider-Man here? So it's a really hard character to keep around. Otherwise, you've got the Sentry problem. You've got the Superman problem. So I think unless you've got a writer that's willing to invest in him, it's better to just not have him.
Well, right. Every one of those Superman, Superwoman, super person type of characters that you get introduced, and there's a ton of them. I mean, there's so many that are so powerful. They have to have some weakness or a tick that makes them unique. It's like with Scarlet Witch. I mean, obviously hers is that she's emotionally, she's so powerful and reactive that if she's troubled mentally, she goes crazy and can blow up the world, right? But she's so powerful, if she can control it and be focused, she's like more powerful than anyone. In Vision's case, right, he'll never understand fully as much as a human would the morality of being a human. So there's always that part of him. His programming is to kill everyone.
They're a yin yang. The control of Vision and the lack of control of Wanda. That's why they're a beautiful couple. They're the Capulet Montagues of the comic book kingdom. They complete each other by one being all emotion and one being emotionless. One is logic. One loses her sense of logic. So I think that's why they're so amazing. Is exactly what you're saying. That's why they're simpatico, because no one else could do that.
I'm going to give a big shout out to Nicole Krafik here, who's in the chat. Big happy birthday to our Infinity patron in the Nerd Network. Big salute to you, Nicole. Good to see you in here. A couple more Streamlabs and Super Chats that we want to shout out here. The next one here is from our guy, Party J. I'm really looking forward to WandaVision. I believe that the first phase was about Iron Man, and now this phase is the multiverse. Also, congrats to this debut episode, and can't wait for more. It came from the comics. Thanks, Party J. Big salute to you, brother. Jetty Domash here. To further off my last Streamlab, I think another entity is responsible for what is going on in the bubble in the trailers, and that entity's actions will egg Wanda into breaking the multiverse. Okay?
Agatha Harkness, I think, is here, and I think we're going to see her in episode 1. It's going to be great.
Do you think Agatha Harkness is played by Catherine Hahn? Is that who it is? Or no?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, not most recent, one of the trailers where she was in the car just laughing maniacally about reality. I was like, oh, she's a witch. I think we're going to get a lot more of that. I think they can go bigger. I think we might get some Dormammu. I think we might get Mephisto. We might go full cosmic, and that'd be a really fun way to introduce, your Midnight Suns. You get your Ghost Riders and like the darker side of the things. So I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm saying that we might look back at WandaVision as those seeds being planted.
Could be. And last here, we've got one from John Lestrina, call sign #Ladies Night. Congrats on the new show. Read through the collection the other afternoon and really enjoyed it. Once everything started to boil over in issues 9 through 12, it was really exciting. And in the end, Vision wants to reset it all and try again. Yeah, it's phenomenal, man. It's really, really good.
And the pacing's so good. Even the first, I love that it's a 4-act structure with 3 issues on act, but the first act is just like, hey, by the way, we're going to build a world and we're going to take our time and you're not going to know what's going on. And then the second act is like inciting incidents, getting crazy. And then you just, when you reread it at once, it's such a well-timed pace machine. There's dialogue that like flows in between each other. There's mirroring. There's so many things that are just like, but yes, I agree. 9 through 12 are just the action craziness.
So the next thing we kind of want to ask here, guys, is, why did this comic get made? Exactly what was it and how did this comic get pitched? And I think to do that, I want to read a couple excerpts here from the treatment that actually in the back of this comic is listed. It actually shows, what Tom King pitched. And granted, I've never pitched a comic book, but I have to think that this is probably what he put together to get the thing made.
While you pitch this, my phone is near dead. I'm going to plug in, so no one mind me finagling. I apologize, Internet. This is behind the scenes of Pilot.
You got it. So it kind of says here, and I don't know that I'll read the whole thing word for word, but it's got a 1-page here. This is The Visions by Tom King. And so, it's got a couple sketches of what the family would look like. It's got Virginia and she's holding a tray of cookies. It's got Vin and Viv, a couple different designs, just visually, physically, the way these characters would look. But it says, in the suburbs of DC, a perfectly normal family of super robots tries to live the American dream and to ignore the body under the stairs. So right off the bat, you kind of know what this is because there is a murder mystery that goes on inside this story. And it's one of the most compelling parts of the story. It's really, really great. It says he wants to be human, and what's more human than a family? He goes to the laboratory where he's created, where a villain molded him into a weapon, where he first rebelled against his given destiny, where he first imagined that he could be more, and that he could be good, and that he could be a man, a normal, ordinary man. And he builds them, a wife, Virginia, 2 teenage twins, Viv and Val. They look like him. They have his powers. They share his grandest ambition, or perhaps obsession, the unrelenting need to be ordinary. They are the Vision. So then it kind of goes on to describe some of the different beats and the pieces. But the whole concept of this, where it's born from, is such a cool use of a character who's been around for such a long time, but just had never been looked at this way. And how would you react? What's the reality of how you would actually react if you were the Vision and you reflected humanity and you wanted to try to live this human life, especially because he has such a deep-seated love for Wanda and their history. And, while Wanda is a mutant, she's also human. She's a human mutant that he has this love for and what she wanted with the family and with the kids. He wants to create that. So it's definitely a very, very cool part of the story and something that I think is super relevant to pay attention to. If you guys do get a chance to read the comic book, I highly recommend reading this pitch at the end of it because I think it's definitely one of the cooler parts. So before we get into the final part of our show, I want to remind everybody here, please hit that thumbs up button. Of course, subscribe to Nerds and Suits here if you haven't already. We're going to be trying to do this once a month if we can. Kelly, Coy is okay. He's alive. Coy's alive. But as well as being alive,
did you see the phone flip? Because I had to get the charger on the right side.
Coy's got a YouTube. He's got a Patreon. Talk to us for a minute, man. What do you got?
Now that I'm back, now that I'm the right way, I've got a Patreon where I talk about every single comic book I read, which, as you might imagine, is many. I try to read every book of the big 2, actually the big 3. I read Image as well. And then I read the big books out of Dark Horse, Boom, and IDW. So I'm reading about 60 to 70 comic books a week. And you can see what I rate, like alphabetically, like A, B, C, D, F, like teachers do. I grade every single comic I read. So A+, A-, B. I also do that with movies and TV shows. So there's different tiers where you can see what I rate each and every bit of content I consume. You can also go a little higher up and suggest I read or watch or consume a movie or show. So someone's got me watching a third at a time My Hero Academia, also me watching movies I've never seen, and then I give a full dissertation review. I take notes during the movie, and then it's like a 20-minute review like I do for any studio or network. So I've got all those. I've also got a patron-only podcast, which is just for patrons, where you can listen to my thoughts on the goings-on in news and reviews and all those things. And I also have my own YouTube page, and I have a podcast called Koicast, where I talk about all the stuff I used to talk about on Heroes, but for your ear holes. So lots of places to find me, audio, video, and Patreon. And I host the show called Comic Book Shopping, where I take the people that make these things and show them the source material. And then while I'm interviewing them, I'm dissecting what they might enjoy and then give them suggestions based off their worldview. So I like to be like a detective of comics. DC of sorts, and then dive into the worlds of comic books to people that might not love them. So I feel like Vision is one of the books I've recommended so much that I can't talk about it on comic book shopping anymore. So I'm happy to do it here with people as we're ramping up to WandaVision.
That's excellent. Well, a couple people just subscribed here. So guys, thank you so much for those subscriptions. We really, really appreciate it. And a quick reminder for everyone here over on our sister channel, Action Industries, youtube.com/Action Industries at 2 p.m. tomorrow, Pacific Standard Time. Andrew Guy and myself are going to be doing our review of the first 2 episodes of WandaVision. And Coy is going to be jumping on as a special guest to share his thoughts. We also will have our guy, PLD, best mustache in the business, on the show with us, jumping in to talk about his thoughts on WandaVision as well. So should be a good time, but go check out all the stuff Coy is doing. And you guys have been incredibly supportive so far of this first episode. So I'm really, really excited to see what we do maybe as the second episode of this.
And Action is an incredible channel, the way you guys format your shows. And I've done guest work over there before, and it's always so well done. I love the Action Industries Army, and I love what you guys built over there. So do jump over there too, guys.
Thanks, man. And you know, we have a couple more super chats and Streamlabs to read here. Remember, for everybody here who is donating, every $10 donation does get you on the list to possibly receive this comic book. Now you're going to sign it and send it out, as well as anybody who signs up as a patron at platinum level or above. 2 entries if you do both. I'm going to read a few of these out. We got the K-Wolf here, my guy Kyle. Big salute to you. I've never been a huge comic reader, but I have been wanting to read more lately and can't wait to check out some of the recommendations from this show. Very interested to see what WandaVision will do. Keep up the great work. Call sign to Gray, legend. Always good to see you. Next up, we got a Streamlab here from the chosen one, Ryan Christensen. Growing up a Canadian kid, I collected only hockey cards. Hearing the two of you talk about comics and others, I wish I would have expanded into comics. Really interesting with the intertwining of universes. Ryan, thank you so much for that support, dude. We're happy to have you around, hanging out. And I think if you collected anything like sports cards, comic books, comic book cards, any of those things growing up, you can relate to the love. That paper, cardboard love. It's all the same. It's all the same.
And collecting is just your passion in physical form. That's what matters, is you're zealous about something that you love that is art. So yes, same shit.
And last one here we have so far is from our guy, Dan Bettenhausen, call sign Hans and Franz. Coy, what is currently on your comic pull list? A newish book I would recommend is James Tynion IV's Department of Truth. Department of Truth is one of the best new books in a decade. That book messes me up every month. That book is so dark and depraved. The issue 4, I had to it was one of those reading an R.L. Stine's book when you're 12, where you're like, oh, I'm going to put that down and just let that marinate. I got affected. Department of Truth is incredible. Totally agree, good sir. If you like that, you probably like Crossover. Donnie Cates doing a book about crossing over from comic books to our reality. So he gets to play with all sorts of continuities as well as our world. So if comic book characters broke into our reality and we had to deal with those ramifications. So it's like Who Framed Roger Rabbit for comic characters. That book's awesome. I always recommend Saga, and I'll continue to read Saga. And those are my big 3. Department of Truth is one of them. So great taste. Crossover and Saga would be my other 2 for you. Fantastic. Thank you so much for that support, Dan. And I feel like doing this show might get me back down the path of just reading comics in general, which would be really fun. I think when we're at our peak with people supporting us, you'll just be breaking even because I'm going to cause a horrible habit. Yeah, I mean, it's not surprising. I mean, comics are expensive. It's one of the things I remember growing up. I'd be like, oh man, I got to read these 6 volumes of this thing. Like $100 later, you read it in 2 days or whatever. And that's why, $10 support gives you a chance for a $30 comic. So frankly, that is a quality raffle. Exactly. And there's quite a few people have already entered in there, but not so many that you guys don't have a decent chance. The goal would be, of course, next episode, if we have a similar level of support, that we would each get one, and there would be 2 of them in the pool. We're trying it out this first one with this first one. So far the support has been fantastic. All right. Last things we're going to talk about before we wrap this very first episode. What can we expect from this show based on what we've seen? Based on what we have actually seen, and what do you think is going to happen at the end of it? How is WandaVision going to end? We've seen a bunch of trailers. We've seen a bunch of promotional materials. People have different theories. I know a lot of our colleagues, they leg upped on us, and they got to see the first 3 episodes, which I'm not happy about. I'm aware, and I am not bitter. I called you. You were like, I've deleted the apps from my phone, all of them. I refuse to look. I won't even look. It gets me so. I was like. I saw the first couple and it was like, guy from comicbook.com and I was like, okay, that's fair. And then it was just like my friends who have similar level or smaller followings. I was just like, really? I was watching so much. FYC Emmys 2020 for a comic book show.
I'm like, why didn't I get on that list? You guys are debuting content that I predicted 8 years ago. Give me some love. It's fine. Marvel, I still love you. I just don't forget. Yeah, no, I literally took Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook off my phone for the week leading up to this because I refuse to be that upset, but I am upset. This, I think, will be much like Iron Man 1's ending, where it's a mic drop. I think it's going to end on a cliffhanger. I think it's going to end with us. I think there's going to be some crazy cameos, to be honest, where it's going to be like, by the way, multiverse. I think we're going to lean right into Doctor Strange. I think the last 5 minutes of this are the first 5 minutes of Doctor Strange 2. So I think it's going to be vital people watch this.
Interesting. Okay, so you really think, and you do kind of feel like because we're getting Eternals, because they've teased so much stuff as far as the cosmic stuff going forward, that this show is going to be the jumping off point. But let me ask you then, we go straight into Falcon and the Winter Soldier. That's going to have such a different tone. Do you think that show is going to be important in the same way, or you think that show is no?
I think this show is the cosmic side of Marvel. I think Falcon and Winter Soldier is the Winter Soldier grounded side of Marvel, which is so important to maintain. I think if we go all cosmic with the Marvel Universe, we lose the thing that makes it so special is the dichotomy between Guardians and Cap. We need that flavor. And I think that Falcon and Winter Soldier is that show for so many people. And then I think it's very intentional. We go right back to cosmic with Loki as Black Widow is scheduled to come out, because I'm pretty sure Black Widow is going to be in Loki. So I think we get a show a week off at most, another show a week off at most, a double-decker with Loki and Black Widow, and then a week off at most, and then we're going to have Eternals in theaters if the world is spinning. And then the winter show is going to tie into the next flavor of things. But I think Loki is going to be the most chronologically jarring and important show, and I think this is going to be the most cosmically reality altering. So I think Loki and WandaVision are going to be bookends around Falcon Winter Soldier so we can get a breath of normalcy. Because a lot of people aren't going to love how weird it's going to get. So they need that Falcon Winter Soldier to be like, okay, I at least know what's going on today.
What do you think about some of these predictions that each episode of WandaVision is going to take place in a different decade? I'd heard somebody suggesting that there was like a 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, that kind of a deal. Because it does look like from the trailers that there's bunch of different time periods and eras and reflective costumes of Vision in certain times. And Scarlet, some of the costumes, they don't look like they're consistent, in the promos that I've seen.
Well, I think they filmed this in front of a live studio audience, which is just the coolest thing. I don't know if that's every episode, but there's an actual laughing audience, like a classic sitcom would be. And I've always loved the fact, very morbidly, that most laugh tracks we listen to were recorded before we were born, and most of those people are dead now. So we're listening to the laughs of the dead. So I think they're going to play with how morbid it is to have a laugh track, because those people are no longer with us. We're hearing the ghosts of the past. And I think that ghosts of the past is going to be a very essential element for Vision, obviously. And I think it's going to be very important that each of the decades passes. So I think it might be like the first 5 episodes up until we get to that, up until we get to the book version of Can't Put This Down. I think we might do a decade per episode, but I don't think it's going to be the entire series. I think it might be our warm-up where we go like 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s sort of thing.
Yeah, it does feel like when I think about the way the show is going to go, I feel like the Gone Girl moment where she's in the car reading the book or reading her diary is a moment that's going to happen halfway through the season where we're all like, oh, this is what's really been happening this whole time. And then the final 3 episodes or 2 episodes of the show is going to be like, my mind's blown. Now I'm so excited for the next movie and I'm getting set up for this next thing and I can't not watch it. Like that kind of shit. I do really feel like they're going to tease it. I saw one person on Twitter say that this show is low-key masquerading, but actually is a horror show. I saw somebody suggest that. And it does make you think, is this show going to be like haunting and creepy in the way that this comic is in a lot of cases?
I think in the way that Dr. Sleep and The Shining are horror, like that under your skin. I mean, taking away the blood elevator, like that under your skin foreboding horror. I definitely think is going to be a factor. I also think it's going to be very important to comprehending the show that it's once a week. I think I love personally weekly television because it gives you a week to talk about it, marinate on it, digest it. I don't think the show would be nearly as strong if it was a 9-hour binge. I think it's going to be something we need to reflect on. And I think you're right about that book moment. I think we're going to immediately want to go back and rewatch the first 4. Like, I think we're going to need to be like, wait, this restarts everything. And we're going to be rewatching as we go along. Because like you had with the book, you needed to reread that page. I think we're going to need to rewatch certain set pieces in the show.
Do you think, so has it been confirmed this drops at midnight or is it not confirmed?
12:01 PST was the one I read.
Really? Oh man, I'm gonna be up so late.
My problem is I'm like working so hard to be on a schedule for 2021 that I'm like, is it worth sacrificing 2 weeks of effort for my favorite franchise?
It's so hard to recover when I'm up till 2 or 3 in the morning.
And you know you won't go right to bed. You're not gonna be like, well, that's over. Night night.
God, I'm totally gonna watch it. We're doing the review tomorrow. I gotta do it. It sucks.
And the daytime doesn't feel the same. I hate looking at a TV in the light. Like I love the movie theater because it's controlled nighttime. I don't like being like, oh, my 60-inch with reflecting off of every surface in my house.
Yeah, I also need to make sure that I don't do the thing where I'm like drinking wine while I do it, because I'll definitely fall asleep. And this is no Legend of Bagger Vance or The Village. This is important. I need to actually stay awake for this.
You know, the Legend of Bagger Vance can wait. Vision cannot.
Vision cannot wait. Guys, I think it's going to wrap up our very first episode here of It Came From the Comics. A last couple things here before we get out of here and wrap up. We have all these wonderful comic book properties coming out over the course of the next year. I mean, there's so many. There's the Sony stuff. There's all of the Marvel stuff. There's the DC stuff. And so many of them have incredible source material. And I am wondering, you guys watching, what do you guys want to see the next episode of this show be about? What do you guys want us to cover? I know Falcon and the Winter Soldier, there's an incredible run that we could absolutely reference there. There's really good stuff there. But that's not going to be for a couple months. So if we did in 1 month, what would you guys want to see? What's something that's coming out a little bit more in the short term that you guys would want to see us do? I would love to hear that. And for anybody watching this show who wanted to be in on this giveaway for the Vision comic here, but you can't Streamlab or Super Chat because the show's over, until the end of the day, until the show actually premieres at 12:01 for the rest of the day, if you guys join the Patreon at that level, that $15 level, I'll enter your name until the end of the day. That's how we'll do this. But at the end of the day, it's cut off, and we will decide who's going to give it away, and I'll find you. I'll announce it on the next show. That's going to do it. So, guys, thank you so much for watching this very first episode. Coy, anything else you want to add before we get out of here?
February is next month. There's nothing new, but if you guys have an idea that ties into anything recent, or if you like really want us to read House of M or anything that could tie into the same property, like if there's another thing like that, maybe we'll do like a survey or something, but definitely give us lots of input because one, it shows us you enjoyed this episode, but it also gives us something to shape the next one around. I knew Ben would love Vision, but I want to make sure that you, the audience, also enjoy what we're talking about. And most importantly, it might inspire you to pick up comic books because that's, for me, what this is all about.
And yeah, ultimately, guys, you know, it's definitely important. When the episode is over, as soon as this live stream is over, give it 1 minute and then leave a comment. Comments on these videos after they air. They mean so much to these videos doing well. With the show dropping, it would be super cool for you guys to drop a comment on this. Let us know that you liked it. Suggest something for next time. Whatever it is, we would very much appreciate it. Thank you guys all so much for the kind words here supporting what we're doing. Go ahead, Coy.
And other than the note to have my phone charged, let us know what we can do constructively to improve other than inverted phone microphones. But otherwise, like if there's anything you want us to add to the format, like this is a pilot and we are receiving studio notes and you guys are the boss. So please let us know.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. We are going to get out of here. We salute you. We'll see you on the next episode. Enjoy WandaVision. Bye, guys.